Welcome everyone to the July meeting of the Inland Empire chapter of the California Rare Fruit Growers. We're gonna have a pretty informal chat here tonight about surviving the summer heat. Two of our wonderful members, Christine and Lisa, will be leading most of it, but it's gonna be pretty informal. So anything you have to add or any points or lessons learned, feel free to chime in and jump in and contribute. First thing, we'll probably do a couple announcements. Lisa?
Trying to find my video again. Okay. Welcome everybody. Happy summer. It's a toasty, humid one, huh? That's making my hair curl.
Mine
Welcome.
too.
Thank you for joining us. And Kirk, if you had hair, it might curl. I don't know. You got yours cut.
That was my eyebrows.
We are, as you come in tonight, make sure you save the date for the first Thursday in August, and we'll be talking about mangoes at our next general meeting.
Ooh.
So, okay, so the
Yummy.
first Thursday in August, 7 to 8:45, mangoes. Yummy. I also want to encourage all of you who are eating mangoes this summer, if you can try to propagate them. They're one of our rare food growers' highly demanded plants when we do our spring plant sale. So if you can start nurturing those seeds, there's a lot of good YouTube videos on how to start mango seeds and then grow them through the summer around our winter and into spring, and we'll love you for that. We also graft mangoes as well. So as you're eating that delicious orange fruit. And I am, what else? I forget what I was gonna say. Christine, what other announcements did we have tonight?
That's all I had.
Plant sale,
I know
fall
there's a
plant
home
sale.
and garden show going on in Riverside, but we're not going to participate as our group. But if people want to go to the home and garden show, that's the 9th, 10th, and 11th at the Riverside Convention Center. I know the Master Gardeners will be there giving presentations.
And thank you, Kirk. As we get into, I know that we just started summer, but we're also planning for our fall plant sale, probably in about September. And if any of you start growing your fall plants, like any of your cruciferous vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflower, any other rare fall and winter vegetables, please contact Kirk.
Doesn't have to be rare.
Huh?
It doesn't have to be rare for the sale.
Contact one of us. Let us know that you're starting those so that we can count you in. The members from Rare Fruit Growers also get first dibs on the plant sales, usually. So we'll get more information out as soon as we have that organized. All right. Are there any other announcements? All right, let's get started then. By a show of hands, how many of you have had your gardens torched already this summer and this spring? You can use the emoticons, or you can take yourself off of mute too. Okay. It's been toasty, and I don't think we've seen anything yet, huh?
I think my mango plant is the one that's suffering a bit. But I moved it to a more shaded area, and I grew that from a seed, so it's very young still.
So definitely as you are getting your seedlings started, they prefer maybe a northern exposure and definitely indirect sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for peeping up. I had to learn that the hard way. They say full sun, but not when it's first getting started. So, well, what we're here tonight is to learn.
And full sun doesn't mean Inland Empire full sun. Our full sun is a
Definitely.
whole nother quantum leap.
That's torching sun, torching sun. But what we'll be learning tonight are just some basics. And I want to encourage you as gardeners that although these are guidelines, each of you has a very individual and unique garden area and environment. So use these as guidelines, but then also experiment, try, fail, and adjust, which is completely okay. I've killed numerous plants and trees, but keep experimenting. This is a learning, and it's a journey. It's a learning journey. And again, we're here to help supply you with some of the skills to overcome the summer heat, to make your garden more resilient. You're probably going to hear that term more frequently. If you have a hot weather snap or a cold weather snap, how can your garden be flexible and still tolerate these extreme factors? But definitely today.
I heard a saying, Lisa, there's a saying that I take to heart. It's if you don't know a plant until you've killed it 3 times.
Yeah.
I've really gotten to know a lot of plants.
And we try, and try. There we go. But we'll definitely be covering water tonight, light, and also plant personality. Plant personality is, in general, planting the right plant in the right place. However, as a lot of us gardeners try to experiment, we can actually create microclimates or adjust climates to help support plants that we shouldn't grow here. For example, tropicals and subtropicals. We can create a more moist and humid environment, either with a shade house, a greenhouse, and grow more tropical fruit or subtropicals like our bananas, kiwis, mangoes, papayas, anote, sapote, things like that. But Christine will get more into that and several more of the rare fruit later in our presentation tonight. And I want to encourage all of you, if you have any questions as we go along, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, okay?
Thank you.
The USDA.
But they can also throw questions into the chat box, right? Sorry.
And if they're in the chat box, Kirk, could you help me answer the questions then or bring them up?
No problem.
Yeah, he said he would monitor it.
So the soil guidelines from the USDA, they actually promote complete soil coverage, or minimize it at least. And out here in the Inland Empire, Riverside County, I think with the attempt to promote less water usage, everything has gotten bare soil, bare clay, bare decomposed granite. And many people have taken out their lawns and put in rock gardens and such. So that still covers the soil, but does that help improve the ecology in your garden, in your surrounding area? So these are things to think about, and we can adjust. You can have both of it, but the bare soil helps to, well, if you think of it, cover your legs. Okay, it just keeps the sunburn away, and the creatures below the soil, your worms, your insects, even the good bacteria, they can help thrive in a better soil. And develop your resiliency, again, in your environment. Improving your soil also helps the critters all around by developing the soil food web. Now, that is also a term that you might want to do more research on outside of this presentation, the soil food web. But it includes the carbon, organic matter, which you might also hear as soil organic matter, and the microbes below there. So even though you might not be growing anything, there might actually be some algae and other microorganisms within your soil or within deep pockets of soil where there might be some moisture. Other soil guidelines are to minimize soil disturbance. Minimize your tilling. Now, if you were like me, I grew up in a family in the Midwest that we always tilled our soil because that was a thing to do in the 70s and in the 80s. But that's actually old advice right now. And when you break up that soil, you're actually breaking apart networks in that soil food web. And you don't want to do that. It's like cutting the 405 and the 91 and the 60 into small pieces. You know, traffic goes haywire and there's just congestion and plants can't talk. So if you are planning on transforming your yard or developing your garden or installing a new garden, think about that. Make that first amendment. Maybe do that first initial tilling if you need to stir in more soil organic matter. But then successive years, try not to dig into it too much. Try to minimize that.
Or consider doing a sheet mulch or a lasagna composting where you just leave the soil as is and you build layers on top of it. You're composting in place and then you just plant down through those layers.
Yes. And how many of you have been purchasing through Amazon and you have all those cardboard boxes stored up in your garage or alongside the house? Yeah, I see you.
Guilty.
Or all those cardboard boxes my new cabinet just came out of.
This is a perfect time to upscale your cardboard and to use it to develop a beneficial ecology all around you. The worms are going to love you for it. Yes, you have to wet it down, but again, look at other YouTube videos on lasagna composting, okay, with the cardboard.
Actually, if you want to do the lasagna composting, the timing will be better if you can pile up your cardboard and save it until fall, just before we get the winter rains, and then start laying, so get your materials together. You can start saving the leaves as they fall. You can start, any of your clippings, so you can save all the dry stuff and the cardboard, and then just before it rains, you can pile it all up, and then you'll have the rains help you with rather than you having to water it and use your water for that purpose.
Unless we have these cloud bursts.
But that's not going to help you survive the summer right now.
So
also, I've noticed that Amazon's now using paper tape rather than plastic tape on a lot of the boxes we've ordered. So you don't have to pull all that plastic off.
Go Amazon.
I wrote them a thank you letter.
I'm also using my cardboard to take away any unwanted grasses, the crab grasses in other garden areas, and I'm doing that now. As I'm trying to plan for fall, and that usually takes maybe 3 to 6 months in advance. So it takes planning, but I'm working on it. Anyway, so plant diversity. Plant diversity also increases your ecology around your home and around your garden. You have different pollinators that will come in. You'll have a decrease in pests, unwanted pests with plant diversity. For example, even planting mint within your garden, or your marigolds, your pollinator plants, different trees. So it kind of confuses the pests, and they just can't go in there and attack, a 25-foot bed of lettuce. So if you have some onions,
they do get different smells.
Yeah, it confuses them. It confuses them.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, this is a relatively new method, or a return to a method that is well proven. And then lastly, in the soil guidelines, create pollinator food and habitat. I recently learned from the Xerxes Society, which is the butterflies, that you want to plant at least 3 seasons worth of different flowers, of either nectar-bearing flowers or foliage that the caterpillars can munch on. The caterpillars and butterflies aren't here just for 1 season, but they expand usually 3 seasons. So especially if you're on board with, saving the western monarch along our coastline, and that's something to think about. So you can do it all, but take a little bit at a time. If you have to shrink or move your window, please go ahead and do so. I know some of these slides are offset to the left or the right. The first topic I wanted to talk about as far as retaining water is mulching. 3 to 4 inches minimum. Now, a mulch can also be a ground cover, such as clover, living clover, grass clippings, wood chips, inorganic material like rock, and then as you see from one of Christine's pictures, other plants, and they can either be native or non-native. This is Christine's wonderful newly planted garden. And she's actually using squash, watermelon. I see some, is it milkweed in there,
Pumpkins.
Christine?
No milkweed. There's poppies, there's artichokes, there's sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes love the heat. And onion, I have onions close to the trees because they exude chemicals that the trees pick up and help keep pests away. But the squash and melons and watermelon, lately they've been growing almost a foot a day. I saw some vines I measured yesterday and they almost grew a foot from yesterday and today. And I'm constantly having to move the vines around to save at least a walking pathway. So the idea is to keep the ground cool. And someone, when I posted this picture, they said, well, aren't they using up the nutrients that the tree needs? And melons are a heavy feeder. But when I planted those trees, we planted the tree, we planted them high. So they're kind of in a little island in the middle there. And then they have a water basin around them. And then the berm at the edge of the water basin, we put a thick layer of very rotted manure. And then I planted the melon seeds into those berms. So they've got the rotted manure to grow from. And then I also still do a foliar spray, meaning you spray the leaves with a compost tea, and I add seaweed extract and fish hydrolysate, as well as apple cider vinegar and molasses in the compost tea. So I do that monthly during the growing season, so they still get nutrients. So they're all sharing together, but by having their roots a lot cooler, shaded, it helps keep the soil moisture, and just, the roots aren't so hot, and they're happier.
And you should
Also
be
keeps all
watering.
those microbes about. Keeps those microbes happier too,
Yes.
and fungi.
The Underground Food Soil Network. This is another picture of one of our neighbors, and the tree pictured is actually an avocado tree. Now, she's actually in decomposed granite, and for the first time this year, we put down 3 to 4 inches of compost. And this is Vertex organic compost out of Fontana, if anyone's interested in that. Love the stuff, definitely recommend it. It's less than $10 for a cubic yard or pickup truck bed full. And the avocado, this is when we first put it down. It is thriving, it is blossoming, it's getting so many micronutrients, it's green, it's full, it is so happy, it is so happy. So we kid that we send her tree to the spa for influx of micronutrients and hydration control on its leaves and fruits. Going into watering still, if you have transplanted any recent trees or plants, hopefully by the end of May, you want to increase or keep watering it a little bit more frequently until it's well established. Established means that the root ball is starting to send out more feeder roots through there, and it's coming out of that initial hole, or it's growing outside of that initial hole that you dug, or even your small vegetable garden transplants. Starting from seed right now may not necessarily be recommended for immediate in-ground, but use your transplants that you find at your garden stores, at your big box stores, from friends, okay? And I recommend that you plant in the early evening. Now, you would think, why? Because you want the sun. But in the early evening, after the heat goes away, maybe around 6 or 7 these days, when you plant in the evening, then it's cooling off, and the plant has around the clock evening through the following morning until about 11 or 12, until the heat of the day, to kind of get situated and adjusted before it starts getting hot. Versus if you planted in the morning, let's say 6 o'clock if you're an early bird, 8, 9, or 10, then by 11 or 12, it starts cranking up the heat. And I've done that and come back the next day and I just get a brown twig. So try to transplant in the early evening.
And consider putting up some kind of a shade structure for a few days even. Or block some, put some big trash cans next to it to block the sun. Or
and if you're growing any beans or vertical gardening, cucumbers, watermelon, that trellis, if you plant the trellis on the west side of your garden bed, and then you put the seedlings on the east side, so that trellis planter, the taller structures, can actually provide shade for the smaller new transplants or those that do not like the full sun, like your lettuces. Mm-hmm.
I got a question here. Is burlap acceptable for summer shading?
It can be.
I don't see why it wouldn't.
It depends on what you're trying to shade. What are you trying to shade? It's kind of spacey. So I've actually invested in some shade cloth, and that has a percentage degree from, I don't know, 20% all the way up to maybe, what, 60%? So depending on what you're trying to plant, if you're trying to plant subtropicals, the greater the shade, or a medium, I would say 20 to 50% shade, especially in the afternoon shading, is very important as you, if you're trying to plant subtropicals.
So
like
Dan said it worked for his avocado and vegetables. So Dan, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to jump into the combo here real quick. If not, appreciate the comments and question.
Sure.
I know oh, go ahead.
I just said, sure, thank you. Just for a period of time when it was up to over 100, I had gotten a whole bunch of burlap a couple of years earlier for covering plants from freezing. And I decided I needed to try this because I have a relatively young avocado and we have raised bed vegetables. So I just draped them. And my wife and I were a little dubious because we weren't sure if it was going to cut off air or allow them to breathe or whatever, but it seemed to work just fine.
Good. And is that burlap like in a potato sack, or is that burlap like you see them screen on hillsides to prevent erosion?
It's sold in sheets. Okay. It's pretty wide woven. I mean, when I have draped them, you can still see the plants through the fabric.
Fabulous. And what's nice about that is it's not too heavy, so that's not going to break any branches.
Right. In fact, actually, right. I've been using clothespins.
And it lasts for longer than a season.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, some of this stuff is so cheap. It just shreds off, and then you have to pick up the pieces throughout your yard. So keep that in mind too.
Sure. Thank you.
Well done, Dan. Thank you.
Along those lines, in Riverside, on the corner of Van Buren and Victoria, there near the sports complex park, there's a avocado grove they planted a couple of years ago, but they put stakes by each tree and then tied a couple of palm fronds to each stake, and they're on the west, kind of the southwest side of each tree. So I thought that was a very clever.
I agree. That seemed like really smart move. I run past there frequently and thought, wow, that's a novel approach.
However, they did that after the first round or two got torched. Now, ideally, avocado trees need a mothering tree, and we'll cover this a little bit later on tonight. But avocado trees in the wild actually are understory trees that grow under taller trees that provide some filtered sun.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm on my 5th round of avocados right now, and we're constantly moving it, trying to find different locations that will actually improve. And finally, we found one, but we planted on the north side of a palm grove. And they love loamy soil. Most of their feeder roots are within the first, 1 or 3 feet. They're very shallow rooted, and they need high organic material. And avocados, usually the first 5 to 7 years are very, very, very temperamental. So you've lost trees. Keep trying again. Christine said 3 times. I'm on my 5th round. That's an investment, but yeah, keep trying.
Well, I'm on only my 2nd round of the avocado, so good. Maybe 3rd time's the charm.
So I'm really excited. One of our neighbors, Jessie, up here in Woodcrest, she actually got to grow some gem avocados, and these are amazing. Next to Haas, they're a UC hybrid variety, not yet available in stores, but I guess the patent is maybe expiring at the end of this year or next year. And so it's so delicious. If you're able to get gem variety, they are a late spring through early summer variety, and mouth-watering, creamy, delicious.
Is that gem like the name, or is that gem like the stone?
Gem, as in the stone. G-E-M. And watering. Native is not the same as a water-wise plant. Native, there are some plants that require a lot of water. And then there are the water-wise plants that aren't native that don't require a lot of water. So as a consumer, as a resident, make sure you keep those 2 ideas apart and research what the plant actually needs. If it's native to our regional area, to the state of California, or, and then what kind of water it needs it is. But those can be 2 separate things, so they're not the same. And then finally, once your plant is established, you can actually decrease the water usage by 60%. And then we adjust depending on what your environmental factors are. If we get the big Santa Ana winds that come through, or the heat waves that come through, those are things that we can adjust for. Now, one of the tactics that I do like when we have a forecasted heat wave or a wind event is that I will actually pre-hydrate, pre-water my garden 3 days in advance. Deep, thorough watering. It's not necessarily drenching, but maybe a slow water that percolates down. It takes about 3 days for the water to percolate down 3 to 5 feet. So that's why I start so early. I'm just gonna take turns moving the water around and getting my plants well hydrated. Now, when we have a heat, what did they call it last year? A heat dome, where one day it was 70 degrees, the next day it was 115. The plants have absolutely no time to really prepare and adjust, and neither did we, but we tried our best. Okay, it's just, we gotta adjust with our environment. And same thing for the wind. Wind is very drying. You ladies know, especially baking out in the sun or just being outside working in the sun, that our skin gets so dry, right? Especially in the wind, it just gets so dry. So the plants feel the same way. And so they need a little bit more hydration when we have these big wind events come through. Plan ahead. Okay. Oh, one other thing on the watering. So if you have good soil organic matter, your compost, your plant material, leaves, I try to encourage a lot of my neighbors to leave the leaves on or scrape the leaves and different organic matter over their beds or on the side and allow it to decompose in place. All that soil organic matter, for every 1% that you can increase in your soil of organic matter, you can actually retain over 30,000 gallons of water in 1 acre. 30,000 gallons of water in 1 acre. So if we have this rain dump, it's no longer going to float off your property, all this water, but all that organic matter is going to act like a sponge and hold it in place. And that's free water. I don't know about you, but the cost of water is going up. I'm using less, but I'm still paying more. I don't get it. But that's another story. Okay, we're moving on to light. Light is very interesting. As Christine had mentioned earlier, full sun in Riverside County is scorching, burning sun, like you can see on this plant leaf right here. It is just burned. The chlorophyll has burned out of it completely. And this can happen to trunks, the main trunk on a tree, as well as the fruit can get sun scorched. And it usually happens on the south and the west side as the sun comes up, you know, it travels from the east through the south and then ends up on the west side. Okay, especially during our summer, it gets really hot. Those are the most intensive directions, south and southwest. So that's why people paint their trees white. It's a sunblock. And it's very effective. You don't have to paint the whole thing. You can just paint the west or the south and southwest side. But people just paint the whole thing just to make it look uniform. I have allowed some of my trees actually to branch out and clump towards the bottom so that their trunk is actually not exposed anymore and they don't get sunburned. But the sunburned damaged tree, most of the trees can recover. The water can still travel up the trunk on the north and the east side of the trunk. But I've had some full sun magnolias that just got torched and they just did not recover very well. I had a blueberry tree that was torched on one side. And so on the north side, it's trying to grow back and I'm leaving that dead stuff. Normally I would trim it off, but I'm leaving that dead stuff as a sunscreen until the winter time when the new growth over here is a little bit stronger and woodier so that it can tolerate next year's summer. When we have too little light, and this is especially for your fruiting vegetables, your fruit trees, too little meaning less than 6 hours a day, they tend to get leggy, or like the picture you see on your on the right side of the screen. They're light green and they're twiggy. They're not very strong at all. So that's an indicator that you're not getting enough light. Now, I thought I was being super smart, and in this very powerful Riverside County sun, I decided to plant my radishes, because I love radishes, and lettuce in the shade. Okay, it still gets the morning sun, but it only got maybe about 4 hours worth before it went behind some trees. So I got a whole bunch of vegetative radish leaves. The lettuce didn't do too good either, and it was just a bad spot. So I ended up breaking those raised beds down. We had 3 raised beds, and both of them were an F for failure. But we tried. Didn't know. Now I know. If you're trying to plant any of the root vegetables, like the radishes or the turnips, and they're not getting enough light, those bulbs won't grow either. You're only going to get the vegetative growth sparsely and legally. I don't think that's a word, but I'm making one up tonight. But it's not going to get that root that you're looking for. Carrots, same thing. They still need more light than that. And when you have adequate light, then you have proper fruiting, your tomatoes, your peppers. But as Christine had mentioned, maybe it needs that afternoon sun, or what Dan did is he put a barrier in place, or a shade material, or using another plant that can tolerate that. I actually built a vertical trellis with a cattle grate that I got from Tractor Supply, and I've got loofah growing up and over it. And I'm training some beans and some tomatoes snuck in there too. And that's providing really good shading material for the lettuce that's grown on the east side of that trellis. So that's a win-win.
Another thing that has worked for us, Lisa, is we have constructed kind of a crossbar over our 2 raised beds and put some string down from twine. And then we have had in one of the beds tomatoes that have climbed up the vines. And in the other one, we have butternut squash vines climbing up. And they provide all kinds of shade. for our bell pepper plants. And initially, even for our lettuces earlier, like in March and stuff. It worked really well, and it's a handy thing.
And it's a win-win.
Right.
And you're getting, the tomatoes are off the ground and they're getting more air through that, so you have less pest pressure too.
Right.
You're probably not getting powdery mildew. You're probably
Right.
not getting as much aphids because of the airflow through that,
Right.
which is excellent. Well done. High five.
Thanks.
Manage your pests. Okay, so if your window is blocking this cute little picture or this ugly, nasty picture, go ahead and move your video window and you can see what I mean. I'm not quite certain what's at the top of the picture, but the eyes just looking back at you are just completely adorable, unless you have this pest and it's eating your garden inside and out. Now the middle picture, who can say what the middle picture is? I heard chicken treats.
No idea.
Catherine, did you have a?
I have no idea what, I mean, the two are, the top two.
What's that?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't have an idea. It's nasty looking grub though, huh?
Yeah.
Bad. Oh. So
Well, the top
grub,
one's a praying mantis, isn't it?
it looks like it. It almost looks
But yeah, I don't
cartoonish,
know what
though.
that middle one is.
So I put the middle one in
It
just
doesn't-
as a nasty looking grub picture, because a lot of times the grubs will eat our roots. Many times a lot of the grubs are the Japanese beetles that fly around that will end up eating our passion fruit and our bananas and other fruits out there. I found an interesting tidbit is that most moths lay in the ground. So the cocoons that you might find in the ground are actually from moths, versus caterpillars, and Christine, you can verify this for me, will actually have their chrysalis above ground. And so that's a good differentiation. I don't know, when I find too many, especially the grubs in ground, again, those are just chicken treats, high protein chicken nuggets, protein nuggets for
Well,
my.
the moth chrysalises, the moth pupa, it's a pupa that I know of, you know, like the tomato hornworm, which I know most of you will probably think, ew, you don't like those, but those are one of our only pollinators for plumeria. And they have it's a big case and it has a tube coming off of it, brown. It looks like it has a periscope, if you've ever found one of those digging into the ground. And those are about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches big. There's littler ones. They'll be, you know, similar with also the periscope, and there'll be others. So yeah, there's more moths in the world than there are butterflies, and they are good pollinators and they are good food for birds. So it's kind of a dance with nature, but I know when they get out of control, you have problems.
This website, Integrated Pest Management, ipm.ucanr.edu. That stands for Integrated Pest Management for the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources. Say that 5 times fast. But it's an excellent site, bookmark it. You can put in your pest problem into the search window, whether it's your vegetables, fruits, or your orchard, and come up with solutions or descriptions, what your pest is, help identify it, and then treatment for it. So definitely keep that in your resource tool shed. Now the bottom picture down here.
There's a couple of comments.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say there's a couple of comments from Larry in the chat, and he's reminding us that we do not have Japanese beetles in California, and I do know, but everybody calls them Japanese beetles, so you go with
Thank
the
you for the
flow. Yeah,
correction.
they're the green fig beetles, or I've also heard them called the iridescent downy fig beetles, or I've heard them called the green fruit beetles. But real Japanese beetles are back east, and they're only about half the size.
Sorry, I'm trying to break my habit. Thank you. Thank you. The bottom right picture is an ant. And do you see those black things?
Aphids.
Aphids.
Yes, they're
Nasty
aphids.
little buggers. I hate them.
And so I actually like my ants to a degree. I follow them. I follow their trail so that I can find out where they're going. And usually it's to the end of a tender new shoot branch with all these aphids feeding on the new growth. It's tender. They can zap their mouth into it and suck out the juices. So that's what I use my ants for, as an indicator that I have another pest somewhere going in the garden. The scale will use the same thing. Now, as the aphid sucks that juice out, what goes in must come out the backside, right? And they produce something called honeydew, which is their waste. And the ants will actually collect that as a food supply and bring it back to their nest. So the ants actually have a symbiotic relationship with these ants and other insects that produce honeydew. And they will protect these little leaf suckers, and because they're harvesting their nectar. They're harvesting the poop, but it's food for them. Nature's wonder. So anyway, the aphids come in different colors. It can come in red and gray and white, green.
Yep.
You can easily just take your hand. Repeat that, please.
No, we're just saying yes, you're right.
You can easily just use a mechanical rubbing action, either with your hand. If you don't like to have green fingers afterwards, use a glove. I've used Q-tips. Some people have used a paintbrush. A feather works great. And when it's super high up in a tree, I just use blasts of water. And I aim for the end tips because they're naturally just accumulating there, again, because the tips are very tender. And I have to shoot them off. They can't really crawl back up, but I have to revisit that area probably about every 7 and 10 days when the life cycle goes through. The aphids get born and they hatch and they keep getting bigger. So every week I go back and I shoot more water up there until the problem is gone. But that's very effective. And I don't use any other pest control besides that.
I was explaining to someone earlier today or yesterday that if we're shooting them off with water, even if there's good guys there, the good guys will crawl back, like the ladybug larva and the green lacewings. But the aphids, if they're actively sucking juice out, or the spider mites or the thrips, they also have mouth parts that go into the plant. And when you hit them with a blast of water, if their mouth parts are stuck in the plant, it's going to break their mouth parts off. Those guys aren't coming back. So unlike spraying with some kind of chemical where you're killing good guys and bad guys, at least this way, the good guys will just get washed off and walk back up the plant. So that's why I often like to put my hand behind the plant as I'm washing, so any of the good guys will just drop straight down so they can easily crawl back up.
You do, yes. And I should have put some ladybug larva pictures in here, but I call them my little black alligators. Look up what ladybug larva looks like outside of this presentation, and you want to keep those on site. And the ladybug,
black and orange.
Yes. And they look like something that you should kill, but don't. Keep them, they're good.
Yeah, they do look a little scary, and many times I've showed people pictures and they say, oh, I've been squishing those, so yeah, do look them up and make sure you aren't squishing them.
They jump, they move really fast, but they eat the aphids.
They can.
So you want to keep those. And
the larvae that are more, the larvae eat more than the adult ladybugs.
And this is also one way that I keep, and I actually am growing ladybugs on my property right now, is from old decaying material. That's primary habitat for lady beetles to hatch their young. Even on undisturbed mustard greens, kind of in a corner that I don't really touch, that becomes a nursery for my ladybugs. And I'm encouraging that. I toss in maybe our leaves or some other compost out there. And they've been coming back year after year now. But for the first 3 to 4 years, we were on bare decomposed granite. And that organic matter is a win-win-win. It helps retain water. It gets my lady beetles in place, and it puts nutrients back in the soil, uncovering my soil. And if you need to move your video grid over to see this, please do so. Okay, this was brought up, nitrogen in moderation. We're told to feed all of our plants. Well, many times when we feed with nitrogen, it creates a new burst of new greenery, right? And sometimes we want that if it's vegetation, if it's vegetables or the leaves that we're eating. But with that first flush or that new flush, it's tender growth. And what did we hear in the last slide or two? What eats that tender growth?
Aphid.
Aphids.
Yes. So if you have a really bad problem with aphids and scale and those other leaf-sucking pests, try to minimize your nitrogen and you won't have that growth of green. Okay, so it's kind of in balance. I know people like full rose bushes, but then all the ants and the aphids come, and that's not good. So I've actually been experimenting and using maybe like a nitrogen fertilizer label, and I'll get to that in this next slide. But to minimize the nitrogen, I can still have a pump of fruit and flower growth, but not necessarily all the greenery growth that attracts all the pests. Does that make sense? So here is a fertilizer label. Usually there's 3 parts: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Or you might list it as, you see it listed as NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium on the elemental table. The nitrogen is for that green growth. Okay, so think of it as leaves. Phosphorus is for structure and for strength. So you have tall, sturdy branches and trunks, okay? On your tomato plants, they're strong and they'll support the fruit. And the potassium, the 3rd number, is for the flowers and the fruit growth. So you need a little bit of all 3. But again, if you have that pest pressure, try to minimize the nitrogen part, the 1st number, and then you can always go a little bit larger on the middle and the last number, the phosphorus and the potassium, for your flowers and your fruit and structure. Okay. Anything over 20 only means that it comes from an inorganic source, that it's man-made. So use it as your own discretion. Everyone has a little different philosophy on that. Okay. This is going to be one of my final slides, and then Christine's going to be taking over and sharing with you different types of watering or plants with different water needs. And a lot of these are either common or on the rare side of fruits. And so please feel free to keep taking notes. If anyone would like a copy of this presentation, feel free to put that information in the chat, and Kurt can write that down and we can send this PowerPoint presentation to you, okay? And again, thank you for sticking with us. Let us know if there's any other questions in the chat or unmute yourself. So plant personality. What is a plant personality? Well, many of us are transplants from other counties, Orange County, LA County. We're used to different plants that we grew up with out there. And when we came over here into the Inland Empire, we tried to bring them with us. And what usually happened? They died. Completely. It's a plant out of place. So when you buy plants out here or wherever you may be living, because you might be joining us from a different county, maybe San Diego or Sacramento, I don't know. But welcome.
You're just talking about counties here in Southern California. Think of Frank, who came from Pennsylvania, or somebody else who comes from back east and has to get used to our climate and weather.
Or you can grow hosta, and it's very common out here, but over here in Riverside, not too much. But there is lots of other delicious and beautiful plants and flowers and trees that we can grow. I really miss my chokecherry trees from Chicago, and I'm trying to experiment to see if I can grow them out here, but we'll see. Anyway, plant personality. What is the final size? So many times we get a little 2-inch transplant, or a 4-inch, or a 6-inch, or even a gallon or larger. But then, you know, they grow out 18 inches, 2 feet wide. So know the final plant size, the room that it needs to go and stretch out with. So there are many good things that we learned from this pandemic, that spacing is necessary, even in our garden. Now, we can also plant bio or with a denseness, but it's balanced out with our pest pressure. But what's the final size? So if the plant's going to grow at 18 inches, then the next plant I want is maybe 18 inches or 24 inches away for plant spacing. What are the water needs of the plant? Both when it's being, if I'm planting it as a seed or a transplant, or different seasons, if it goes dormant and it loses its leaves, am I able to cut off the water then in our winter time, so that I don't have to rot the roots during winter? What are the soil needs? Does it like sandy, well draining, quick soil like our citrus, or does it like loamy soil that holds a lot of retention, water retention? What kind of food does it need? We have some really hungry feeders right now. Our tomatoes, our, what did you say? Bell peppers? Yes. And every once in a while, maybe our squash. And if you do succession planting, when you take out your first or second round of fruits and vegetables, maybe you put in new peppers and new tomato plants for the second part of the year, you're going to need to amend your soil and put those nutrients back in. Every time we grow something and we harvest, we keep taking away nutrients from the soil. It grows up, we take it away. So we have to complete that feedback loop and put the nutrients back in the soil. It's the mineral content that gives food our flavor. If you don't have the micronutrients, the minerals in there, it tastes bland, it tastes flat, it tastes like cardboard. Organic strawberries you find on the corner, big, red, juicy, these are gonna be great dipped in chocolate. And then you bite into it and you're so disappointed. There's absolutely no flavor, but yet it was just picked the day before up in our organic part in San Luis Obispo. Why? Even though the organic farms are doing organic processes, if they're not putting the nutrients back in the soil, the fruit is not going to have flavor, or it's the variety of fruit. So if you don't like the taste, try something different.
Beware that the organic strawberries from Driscoll's, they're grown hydroponically. That's a whole, they changed the rules so hydroponic could be considered organic.
Yeah. I don't have an opinion on that. Do you, Christine? The one thing that I feel shorted on is that all of those plants aren't able to get into the soil food web because there is no soil, and all that mycorrhizal fungi.
Yeah, that they evolved with the soil fungus. So I think growing hydroponically, they've got a whole different set of bacteria and fungi that they grow with. So I would rather stick with soil grown plants. And I think the challenges that they have helps them develop their antioxidants, which is why we want berries.
And the healthier the soil, it grows up into the plant. And like Christine had just mentioned, it increases the plant immunity, and we call those antioxidants. So when the plant has more antioxidants and we eat those berries and we eat those leaves, what do we get healthier? Yes. This is one dietitian here that agrees with nutrient-dense food growing. Okay, finally on your plant personality, know your light needs. Know the know what you have on your own property, because everyone's property is different, or where you're growing. Maybe it's you're in an apartment and you just have, you know, one side on a balcony that you get sun. So plant with the factors that you have in mind, okay, and what you can have success with. And heck, if you have a neighbor across the balcony or across on the other side of the apartment complex that has a different, maybe a western side facing balcony or a staircase, become neighbors with them and, you know, friends, and you guys can swap harvests. So it's a win-win-win. We're trying to build community, right? And ideally, if you have an abundant garden, then you can share and you can break bread and trade with other neighbors and create more friendships. We need that, especially in our mass society. You know, we need to find out who we are again. So that's love gardening. And Christine, this is where you're going to take over here. I gotcha.
Okay, my turn.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you also caught me with my mute on. Maybe I'll go inside because my guinea fowl are talking and singing, and they were kind of noisy. Anyway, I'm going to talk about. If you have any
livestock, poultry, that they'll help till up the soil. They'll find the pests in the ground, the cutworms, and they'll just munch on them. So they're an integrated pest management team member, and they earn their keep, huh? They give you eggs.
They give me eggs, yes. Well, not yet, but the guinea fowl haven't yet. But a lot of my other chickens do. And the guinea fowl are also known for helping protect the chickens, and they find ticks and rattlesnakes and scorpions. So and they're good at alerting the chickens if there's any hawks or something overhead. So we're going to talk about drought tolerant plants, and I have 3 different levels of drought tolerant plants. There's the very drought tolerant. So these are going to need, this is the least drought tolerant level that I'm going to talk about, but they are still somewhat drought tolerant. Then there's the highly drought tolerant and the extremely drought tolerant, where you don't need to give them any water at all. So
you're on mute.
There. On the very drought tolerant, we have several here. Some you may know, some you may not know, that they benefit from the occasional irrigation. And if you want to get fruit yield, they do need irrigation. But if you're in a really bad drought, you may not get fruit that year, but at least you'll keep your plants alive with minimal irrigation. And so these are ché, elderberry, figs, gojies, grapes, herbs, and I'll explain why herbs are in here with fruit, mulberry, strawberry trees, and strawberry guava. Okay, next. So the ché is maybe a little more unusual plant, Coudrenia tricuspidata. It's a deciduous shrub or a small tree. It gets up to about 15 feet, and they have male and female plants. So you need both. I have some cuttings I got from our January scion, and I'm still I had 4 of each, and only one male still alive. So I'm saying, stay alive, stay alive. And they ripen in the fall. They're related to mulberries, but they have kind of a watermelon flavor. So that's something, if you're not familiar, you might want to try it. If you want to try it before you invest in a plant, a lot of times you might find them at the 99 Ranch Market. Next. So still in this category of very drought tolerant is elderberry, which is Sambucus mexicana, but also I found it listed as Sambucus nigra cerealia, or blue elderberry, or the Mexican elderberry. It's the same, our local tree, it's the same one. So it's a small, quick growing tree. It's a California native. I know elderberries are also in Europe. So that's the Sambucus nigra, but not the Sambucus nigra cerealia. There's a couple of other varieties. There's a Sambucus canadensis, the red one. Anyway, they have abundant clusters. You can see the picture here when it's in flower. That's the easiest time to spot the trees in the wild is when they're in the flower. You can see the, so kind of a light green tree with these yellowish, creamish clusters of flowers. So if you want to go foraging, note where they are, but you don't want one that's close to a road because they get the road chemicals on them. Anyway, they're very popular with birds and other wildlife. When they're in the flowering stage, you can cut a clump of flowers and you dip them in a batter for fritters. But then later, about August or so, is when you get the berries. And you cook the berries. There's some controversy whether you can eat the berries raw or not. I just heard a talk from Antonio Sanchez, who's with the Santa Monica SAMO Fund, Santa Monica Mountains Foundation, I think. And they have a native nursery up there. And he was saying our local ones, if they're fully ripe, you don't have to cook them. It's the other kind of elderberries from Europe and such that are toxic and need to be cooked. But you can make jelly, wine, cobbler. I've made syrup for flus and colds, so you can find many recipes for doing that, mixing in cinnamon and cloves and honey. So be aware that the green parts are toxic. But I've got, I had 2 growing here on my new property already, and I planted 6 more. And like I said, I have a book on landscaping for birds, and this was one of the most common plants in there for all the so many different varieties of birds that this will attract. Okay, next. Because mine hasn't advanced.
Give me a moment here.
And I'll start talking. The next one's figs. You guys probably know what figs look like anyway. So that's a deciduous tree of 20 to 30 feet. They get wider than tall usually. And they are sensitive to heat and sun damage. So these are ones that you'll want to give some shade, especially in the intense heat of the summer. If you can set up some kind of shade cloth over them, or when you're planting them, plant, especially so there'll be some kind of shade from an afternoon shade from a big tree off to the west or something. You should whitewash them, and whitewashing is taking a latex paint and mixing half and half with water. And then the roots can be invasive, so you probably don't want to plant them close to sidewalks or real close to the house. They have a milky latex sap when you cut into them that can be irritating to the skin. I've heard tales of how you can use that to get rid of warts. I've had that sap on me and it gets a little burning. And you can, when you're picking figs, you can eat them fresh or you can dry them. And there's all kinds of varieties of figs, so you can delve into that a lot to learn about figs. Okay, next.
Christy is asking,
Yes.
How far can the figs, or should the figs be planted from the house?
Well, I would think at least 10 feet. Just think of how, if the roots start, I know, there's some, this one guy I listened to, he says it's not really a problem about roots getting into foundations because there's no water under the house for them. So why would the roots go there? But I would, they can buckle, those roots can get big and buckling. I've seen that. So I guess I would be careful, about 10 feet at least.
And then the other consideration I would have for you too is that sometimes it can attract rats, and then they can get up into your chimney, up into your attic, and then it can get into a bigger problem. So again, use your own best judgment, and they might not appear right away, but that's one of the reasons why. Also in fire country, you want vegetation away from your house or away from structures you don't want to lose.
A lot of these fruit trees would attract rats too, but next. So the next is the goji berry, which is Lycium barbarum. And this is just kind of a short little, I've seen them maybe 4 foot tall. So they just kind of arch over with a little bit of a weeping willow look to them. So you've probably seen goji berries, as in the health food stores, or the different health people talking about how they're a good superfood, that they're very high in vitamin C and E. So they look like little red raisins, and you can dry, when you harvest them, you can dry them like raisins. They have a lot of trace minerals, 21 trace minerals, and they have 2 or 4 times as many antioxidants as blueberries. They're sweet. I've had some varieties that weren't so sweet, so you'll want to try to taste them and find a good one. But they have a real tangy taste. I grew some from dried gojis that I got at the health food store, and those were okay. But later I bought one from I think Paradise Valley, and it had a lot better fruit. So they do have varieties of a range of taste.
And I'm
They are
growing
very
gojis, and when I pick them fresh and eat, they almost taste like bell pepper. But then when I allow them to dry, the sweetness comes out a little bit. And then there's another variety called a black goji, right? And that has different.
I'm not familiar with that one, but I know things that are darker in color that have more antioxidants, more the color flavonoids that will help you too. So grapes, I mean, this isn't that rare of a thing, but grapes are rather drought tolerant. They have deciduous vines, so you can plant them like up against the house, so it's going to shade a wall during the summer, but then the leaves go away in the winter and then allow the warmth to come to the wall. Or you can strategically plan, so just plan where you're going to get shade in the spring and summer, and you're going to have more sun there in the winter time. They require a little water after April and May, so you want to water them well until then, as the berries are just starting to grow. But actually then you want to pull back on the watering as the berries are maturing, and it helps them develop more sugars. Mulch heavily around there so you can help keep the evenness of moisture around the roots. And then I've listed here at the top, there's a California grape, the Vitis california. It's a native to Central and Northern California. But here in Southern California, or there's the Southern California, or the desert grape, Vitis Jordiana. And I've just learned about these from Antonio Sanchez. And he was telling how they have a very intense flavor. They're a small fruit, you eat them fresh. They do have a big seed, but he thinks that if someone started breeding these and could develop something, so they're used to our climate here, but maybe develop something with a little bigger fruit, maybe a smaller seed, something a little more acceptable. But he really likes them, so I'm going to be in search for this desert grape. Okay, next.
Here's a nutrition factoid, if I can interject. I know many
Sure.
of us don't like to spit seeds, although it's fun to have a seed spitting watermelon contest or a cherry seed spitting contest. However, in grapes, there is preliminary research coming out that they are more heart healthy, and that there's just certain phytonutrients, plant nutrients within the developing fruit that has seed that is supposed to be super nutritious for you. So I recommend spitting or even eating the seed. So you have grape seed oil, right? Anyway.
Yes. Grapeseed extract.
Reconsider
So you're saying
that seeds are good.
The fruit that's around a seed is more nutritious than if it was seedless. And I've heard that with watermelons, that the seeded watermelons are more flavorful than the seedless watermelons. And I think from my own experience, that seems to prove true. And I don't mind spitting the seeds, or I swallow the seeds. My mother always told me I'd have watermelons growing out of my stomach, but they never did.
Every parent says that. Why? It's a myth, if anyone doesn't know.
It's like encourage the kids to swallow the seeds. You get more fiber that way, and then there's less mess of them spitting them out,
Roughage, yeah. Yes.
There's a comment
Oh,
here.
I've noticed.
There was a comment here from Larry.
You're going to read Larry's comment?
Yeah. Come back to the figs there real quick. So Larry said that fig roots are not invasive enough to injure masonry foundations or pipe, according to some sources, and I've seen them espaliered on walls. So the size of the roots will be dependent on the size of the tree. So if you are planning to espalier or keep it at a smaller height, the root system will be smaller, so less chances of damage. So just a side note.
Ooh, so fig roots. They are the caviar for gophers. If you have a gopher problem, put your figs into a container. Okay, you can actually plant the container in the ground, And my understanding, Larry, too, is that figs love cozy roots, so they like to be in a container, and that's completely okay. But you got to protect the roots from the gophers. Otherwise, it's gopher heaven for them, in a good way.
I've been planting all mine in those gopher baskets. Yeah. I noticed another comment from Larry back to the Che. He says that there is a self-fertile female that reportedly produces seedless fruit. But then it's seedless, and Lisa just told us it's better to have seeds. So anyway, back to the grapes. This is a picture of my Riverside house before we moved out here to Homeland. And so I had the grapes growing on the eastern and southern side of the house. So they just loved the sun, and they shaded that part of the house and really kept the patio cool. They grew over a patio cover, and then I had them growing on these archways so you could walk under them and just reach up and pick the grapes. So you can train them to grow over structures, you know, if so you can be more artistic with them. You don't have to have them looking like the stereotypical vineyard all the time. And then remember, they're deciduous in the winter, so you'll get, you know, they'll help warm the house. They'll let the sun hit the house in the winter and help warm it up.
And I've actually used this as part of my shade structure as well over the patio, so it actually keeps the sunny side of my house a lot cooler.
So next we're talking about herbs, which I know they're not fruit, but why am I bringing up herbs? Because a lot of these herbs are good to plant as companion plants around your fruit trees. And especially if they're ones that like more sun, put them on the south and west side of the fruit tree. And a lot of these fruit, as Lisa mentioned earlier, talking about mints and things, all these herbs give off different smells. You know, these, I just like rosemary. I love to rub my fingers over rosemary, and anytime I'd be walking around the neighborhood and everybody's got rosemary in their landscaping, and I can, you know, get my rosemary fix. But and lavender too, you know, just rubbing my hands over that. So all of these give off really strong scents, and these smells confuse the different pests. And even the trees, their roots are commingling with these different herbs. They take up some of these chemicals from the herbs and help kind of be a systemic repellent for different pests. So not only are you getting these herbs that you'll have for, you know, using for your culinary or medicinal purposes, but they're going to have flowers, and these flowers attract all kinds of pollinators and beneficial insects. There's lots of little tiny parasitic wasps, and that you know, lay their eggs inside of the insects we don't want so much, and other little tiny flies and tiny bees that are attracted to these flowers. So, you know, consider planting a lot of herbs around your orchard and your garden. You know, tuck them into just little pockets here and there. And a lot of these are the Mediterranean herbs, so they grew up in a Mediterranean climate, which is what Southern California is. So they're used to this climate. They like the heat. They do well here, and they don't need much water. Okay, next. And then there's some native herbs. So again, the natives, the plants that evolved here, they're used to this climate. And a lot of these are useful medicinally and in the kitchen. There's a California strawberry, so the Fragaria californica. And again, Antonio Sanchez was talking about, oh, you're going backwards.
Uh-oh, sorry.
He was talking about, you know, trying to, you know, maybe someone should work on breeding the California strawberry with maybe the Virginia, Fragaria virginiana, which is this kind of the standard one that people grow, to get a little more, you know, because they that's why even organic strawberries, they still use this soil fumigant with them. And then there's chia. This is not the chia you see in the health food stores. It's a slightly different one, but it's our native chia, but you can use the seeds just as well. Manzanita, they make berries that you can eat raw or cooked, and can make cider with those. Miner's lettuce, which is not really that drought tolerant, so I plant them on the north side of my trees, in the shady side, but it's kind of a native, you know, salad green that, you know, grows easily from seed. In fact, when I introduced Boy Scouts to this on some of our hikes, they liked it so much that they said, oh, next time we have to bring the ranch dressing to go with it. So they really liked it. There's the yerba buena, which you can make tea from. There's white sage, the Salvia apiana, which the Native Americans use a lot for purifying ceremonies, and they make tea out of it. There's a black sage, which is also good for tea and good for foot soaks, and there's a lot more purposes to these. So they're great to grow next to your fruit trees as well. Okay, next. So mulberries, I imagine a lot of you have mulberries. These are fairly, drought tolerant, and they're fast growing. They'll grow to 30 to 40 feet, but you can keep them smaller with pruning. There's the Morus nigra, there's the Morus alba and rubra. So there's all kinds of colors of these. There's the dark purple ones, there's the lighter colored, kind of a red lavender. I think the darker purple, the darker colors are going to be more antioxidants and more flavonoids, so more helpful for nutrition purposes. And then we have our Pakistan mulberry. We had several of those for sale at our sale. Those have the big long berries of 3 to 4 inches. So those are easier to harvest. And I know a lot of people don't like the mulberries because they think they're staining, and I know that birds eat them and then they poop, and there's this purple poop all over everything. So they're, for that purpose, you might want the white or the light lavender kind of mulberries. But if, I just plan to plant it maybe away from where you park your car and away from a sidewalk. And then it's easy to then, when you're ready to harvest, each morning I would put a big sheet under them, and I'd shake the tree. I get a big rake or something up to shake the branches and knock the fruit down each morning before the birds got to it. They freeze real easy, and you can also put them in smoothies or on oatmeal, or make cobblers, so they're great. Or you can make jams or jellies out of them. They're more nutritious than blackberries and boysenberries. Okay, next. So we have the strawberry tree, Arbutus unedo. So it's a small to medium-sized tree, and they have attractive white or pink flowers during the fall and winter. That's something Lisa mentioned earlier, that when you have pollinators, when you're trying to help the pollinators, it's good to have blooms in the winter and the fall when not many other things are blooming. It's also good for hummingbirds too. Some of our local hummingbirds don't migrate, so it's good to have things that are providing nectar in the winter time. And these give fruit nearly year round, and the fruit are red when they're ripe, and they're used to make preserves. Fresh, it says they're kind of mealy in texture and bland. I admit I haven't had one of these. I remember they had a tree over at the Western Municipal Water District Garden, the one that was on Alessandro and Mission Grove, but I never tried any of the fruit. Okay, next. So strawberry guava, Psidium catalianum. So this is an evergreen shrub or a small tree, and you can shape it into a hedge or a screen, like a privacy hedge or whatever. And they have small white flowers, and then the fruit is dark red, or there are yellow ones called lemon guavas. And the fruits do have hard seeds, so you want to scoop out the middle part with the seeds if you're going to eat it fresh, or you can use a jelly bag if you're going to try to squeeze it out for jams or jellies. Okay, next. Okay, now we're into the next category. These are the highly drought tolerant. So these are the ones that don't need supplemental watering once they're established. So that means once they've, starting to grow pretty well and do well in their area, their planted spot. But for best fruit and for best quality, occasional irrigation is needed while the fruit is growing. So this is the dragon fruit, golden currant, jelly palm, lingaro, loquat, macadamia, natal palm, olive, persimmon, pineapple guava, and pomegranate. So next. So we have, I know a lot of you grow the dragon fruit. And dragon fruit has a couple of different species names. There's the Hylocereus and there's the cereus species. So they're basically a cactus. They originally came from Central America, although now they're popular in Asia and Vietnam, growing over there. They can be cold hardy down to the mid-20s. So it's a climbing cactus. They need a trellis or something. In nature, they grow up holding on to tree trunks in the jungle. But they do, even though they're coming more from a jungle, they do best with full sun for best fruit production. Again, probably not Inland Empire full sun. So I tried, mine was getting rather sunburned, so I gave them some sunshade. A trellis is some kind of trellis for them. These flower one night only. So, for the best pollination possibilities, you want to be out there and hand pollinate. They do have, we do have some pollinators in the area that might pollinate for you. And then you're probably familiar with the dragon fruit. They're the sweet, mild fruit with the little black seeds in them that are crunchy. Okay, next. They come in different colors. There's a jelly palm. Again, I admit I'm not familiar with this one. It's a small palm, 20 foot high. It has flower spikes in the summer with hundreds of fruit. And the flavor is supposed to be similar to apricots or pineapples. It sounds good. They'll have one large seed, and they're good to eat fresh or in jams and jellies. I see Christy Gray says there's a few strawberry trees at UCR, and she likes the fruit. Okay, and then Lingaro. I know back when we were still having meetings, Larry brought several Lingaro to our tasting tables. They're a small little fruit, smaller than raisins. They have small white flowers. They have the red berries in fall and kind of similar to currants. I wasn't all that partial to the flavor. I don't know if, maybe other people liked it better. They were just kind of mildly sweet, I thought, and didn't have a lot of flavor. Eaten fresh, or you can make sauces, jams, or jellies out of them. I had a plant from Larry, and it was about 7 years before it finally gave me some fruit, but maybe it wasn't happy where I put it. Okay, next. It's a loquat, so this is a fairly common fruit. It's a evergreen shrub or a small tree to about maybe 20 feet. They're fruit. It's one of the first fruits in spring to come. So before the different stone fruit come ripe, so that's why I really like them. And the fruit it has 2 to 4 or maybe even more large seeds inside, but they're easy to spit out or save because you want to grow them. And the flavor's kind of similar to an apricot, although they're not, even though apricot kind of sounds like loquat, but they're not related in any way. Okay, next.
Can I ask a quick question? Does anyone grow this? Yes. And do they have their ground squirrels take off all the fruit from the loquats, or is this pretty much ground squirrel free tree?
The loquat?
Yes.
We have a loquat tree, and I just posted that I call it glorious because it just has abundant fruit. It seems to never quit, and it's real tasty. I do notice that up in the higher reaches of the tree where we can't reach, they get pecked to death, which I remember having a couple years back meeting with Christine Lampe, and loved a comment that she had made where she said, well, some of my fruit critters get, but I get so much I don't mind sharing. And so I've adopted that kind of attitude of, we get an abundance of loquats on our tree, but if some of the local critters get some, more power to them. It's okay. Now
that's kind of a permaculture strategy, is to plant in abundance and share. But right. I put paper bags around a lot of my clumps of the clusters of fruit to keep birds off of them. So I got some good ones too.
Yeah, well, luckily we don't have too many critters, so we get an abundance of them before others get to them, but there's still plenty to share.
So Christine, if you put the bag
in my
over,
riverside.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
If you put the
you're asking
over,
about the bag?
The sun, the fruit does not need the sun in order for it to ripen?
I was trying to figure that out. They still got pretty ripe. I wouldn't put the bag on it until most of that cluster was almost ripe. well, I would wait till I start seeing one or two getting pecked, and then I would put the bag over the cluster. Again, once the tree got so tall, there was clusters way above me that I didn't, those just went for the birds. I was going to say, my Riverside house, we didn't have a ground squirrel issue, so I don't know. We had tree squirrels in that area, but they were mostly a few streets over. And at my new house, this is ground squirrel heaven. They're everywhere. They're my big nemesis now. So I have planted a couple of loquats, but they probably won't fruit out for a few more years. So I won't be able to tell you until then.
So why I asked this is on the Master Gardener hotline, we've had a lot of resident customers write in, how they can protect their fruit from the ground squirrels. And, the bags don't help. Nylon coverings and the bird netting does not help. They chew right through it. And the most disturbing thing, this like on apricots and stone fruit, or nectarines and peaches that are coming out around, is that those darn squirrels, they'll take out just a bit of the fruit, they'll knock the fruit off the tree, take a nip of the fruit, take the seed, eat the seed, and then leave the delicious fruit that you were just one day away from enjoying, and then run away.
Yeah, raccoons were like that too. Anyway, I got one word for you: squirrelinator.
Yes, but they usually get themselves trapped in there after they've raped my tree. And in 2 days, my whole apricot tree was fruitless. Ugh.
Anyway, you wanted me to end at 8:20, and we're past that. So let me hurry up here. Move on to the macadamia. So you're all probably familiar with macadamia nuts. This is a quickly growing tree, but it will take a few years before you actually get fruit. The ripe nuts drop to the ground, so you don't have to try to worry about reaching up into the tall tree to get the fruit. They'll drop down. They have a thick outer shell, and then they have a thick inner shell where you'll need a special cracker. You can order these. There's a couple of different kinds of crackers you can get, but your regular nut cracker will not open them. You need the special kind. And macadamia, the leaves have a kind of a little spikiness to them, so they're not a real friendly. You want to plant it where they're not going to get brushed up against. Natal plum. I remember when I was growing up, our neighbor had these, and we never knew that they were edible. We just, as kids, used to throw them at each other. Anyway, these are a hardy evergreen shrub, so they're good for shaping into hedges. And you went too fast. And they have a good flower, and they have spines, so they're good for a barrier. And they'll be ripe for many months. You can eat them fresh and make jams and jellies, and they're good for throwing at each other when you're kids. Okay, next. Olives, we all know what olives are. And this is a long-lived tree. They have some that have lived over 1,000 years. So they'll get to 30 to 35 feet high, or you can keep them smaller with pruning. And they're pretty cold hardy, and they like clay soil the best. And they bloom late spring, and you'll have a harvest in the fall to winter. You'll have to learn how to do the curing. There's salt curing and there's curing in lye, but you can't eat the olives as is. You have to cure them. Okay, next. Oh, and something back on olives is that the leaves are good livestock forage. Also, mulberries are good. They're good livestock forage. So I'm planting them in my goat area. Anyway, persimmons, the Diospyros kaki. So you're probably familiar with this persimmons, and these are also deciduous. So the trees in fall, they're often, just gorgeous trees. They have this beautiful orange fruit on them, but the trees are dropping their leaves. So you just see kind of like Christmas tree ornaments, these bright orange Christmas tree ornaments on the tree. They'll stay on the tree for a long time if you don't want to just pick them. There's two kinds. There's the astringent type, which is the hachia, and the non-stringent type, fuyu. There's lots of other varieties, but those are the two most common of each. And the astringent means if you eat it too soon, you have to let it get soft and gushy. But if you eat it too soon, it just fuckers up your lips, and it's all chalky and terrible. The non-astringent kind, you can eat them crunchy like an apple, or you can let them get soft and gushy. And that's the fuyu. And we have a native persimmon called Diospyros virginiana. Okay, next. A couple of you are asking about copies of this presentation. Also remember, we are recording it as well, but yeah, we can give copies out too. So there's the pineapple guava, and this is also called feijoa. And it's a shrub or a small tree to about 15 feet, and you can shape it into a hedge or a screen. And they have these edible flowers, which I remember I was, had a talk from the master gardeners about edible landscaping. And then it was a slide about edible flowers. And it had, one of the examples was this, and I'd never had these before as the flower. And then one day I was at the Arboretum in LA, and there was this big bush of these, and I recognized it from the picture. And the peacocks were there eating these flowers. So I helped myself to a few as well. And so you eat the petals, and it's not even really the petals, it's the bracts. And they're succulent and juicy and very tropical, fruity flavored. And eating those petals still doesn't destroy the fruit that's going to come. So you can still have your petals and eat your fruit too. Next. And pomegranate, so probably a lot of you are familiar with pomegranates. There's several kinds. They're a deciduous tree. Again, it's about 15 feet. You can keep them smaller. You can let them, the tree had a vote. They would like to be multi-trunked. That's what they're happiest. They'll send up several sprouts and be real bushy. But you can prune them, make them into a single trunk tree if you want. It's a little easier to manage and they look neater that way. Most have sharp spines. There's a few varieties that have hardly any spine. Parfianca, Desertini, Angel Red, Ambrosia, I think were some of the ones I found that didn't have much of a spine. All of those also didn't have much of a seed inside the little berries. And they have beautiful flowers in the springtime, which right now a few of my trees still have the gorgeous flowers. And then you get the fruit ripen fall. And they can be tart to sweet. They're very high in antioxidants, and they're real easy to propagate just from cuttings. So I have several of the cuttings that I got from the January Scion Exchange that are now growing into, they're still in 1 gallon pots, but they're about ready to get planted up. So I'll have lots of pomegranates next year. So now we're in the last category. Yeah, go ahead. This is the extremely drought tolerant fruit. So these are the plants that we really want to encourage because they won't take hardly any water at all. And so there's the blueberry cactus, jujube, key apple, I think that's pronounced key apple, Peruvian apple cactus, and prickly pear. So the next. So I got a blueberry cactus several years ago when Dennis, I think it's Charmand is his name, came and spoke to us, and he brought some plants to sell, or I think maybe I won it in the raffle. Somehow I got it. So right now it is a tall columnar cactus. It's about 5 feet tall, but it's never ever given me berries. So I'm cursing at it now. I mean, the berries are supposed to taste like blueberries. So hopefully, and they don't really have much in the way of spines. So I'm hoping I'll get to taste it soon. Next is that we have the jujube. This is Frank's new favorite fruit, he told me, because he'd never had any till he came to California. These are, it's kind of like a little dried apple. They're also called, I think, the Japanese date or Chinese date. It's called different names for it. So it's deciduous, and it's, again, a small tree, but they're very cold hardy, but they're very heat tolerant, so good on both ends of the season. You can eat the fruit fresh, or you can let them dry. There's a standard traditional recipe with ginger and Asian pears and this fruit that you make into a tea that I really like. Anyway, next. They do have thorns, by the way, the jujubes. Keys, apples, these really have thorns. They're supposed to, the thorns are supposed to be so big that they would plant them around villages in Africa to keep the lions out as a hedge. So I ended up with 3 of these after their plant sale in May, so I planted them along the fence line. They can get about 15 foot high. You need male and female plants, so I have no idea out of my 3 what's what, but we'll find out. Only the female has fruit, and they do have these big spines. I've never tasted the fruit, so I heard it's supposed to be like a nice tart apple. Next. And the Peruvian apple cactus. This is one of my favorite plants. I have several of those growing here. Tall columnar cactus. They can get about 15 foot high. Again, the flowers open only at night, or well, they'll open, as the sun is setting. So, and they'll stay open a little bit in the morning, but they last only one day. The fruit, they're very similar to dragon fruits. You know, but they're just pink on the outside, white on the inside with the little black seeds that you can go ahead and eat. They're a little crunchy. So I really like these. Next. And then prickly pears. These you need to know how to harvest. You need leather gloves. Do they have, you can see those spines in that picture, but there's also these little tiny invisible spines called glockets that get in your skin, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot get them out. Tweezers and whatever else, trying to get those out. So you want to be real careful. Use hot dog tongs, you know, for picking these off, and then use those tongs to hold them over a little bit of a flame. You can sear off a lot of those glockets that way. The pads are called nopales, and it's kind of an okra-like. When you chop them up, they're a little bit slimy or mucilaginous. I kind of like them. And you can eat them fresh or you can cook them. And the fruit is called tunas, so not to be confused with the fish. And you know, those come in late summer, and they have a quite, you know, sweet melon-like flavor. So there's a different, I know it says the cactus with yellow flowers, but there's also some pink ones, different kinds of colors. And there is a sin espinas, which is Spanish for, you know, without spines. So I have that variety, but it still has a little bit of spine. So you still have to watch out for it. Next.
Quick nutrient note, the nopales is supposed to be excellent for blood sugar control. So if people have diabetes,
Yes.
The nopales is great. Not only is it a vegetable, but it's also good for you. So it's going to help fill you up, and I think that's where the blood sugar control comes from. The sticky, gooey stuff, though, should also be good to lower blood cholesterol. It can help maybe remove that from your bloodstream and pass it out of your system. So it's a win-win.
Okay, this is our last one. I kind of knew about this one because I already have it growing on my property, but I'm not sure how to, I wasn't exactly sure how drought tolerant it is. So I wasn't sure what classification to put it. But Antonio Sanchez was just really raving about this. So I'm glad I had already picked some. Golden currant, Ribes aureum. Ribes is the family that, you know, boysenberries and blackberries, all those are ribes. So it's in that family. But this is a summer deciduous shrub. It's a California native, and it will take the 100-degree heat. So it does well in the heat, but it turns golden in spring, and then you get these ruby fruits that turn black in the summer. If you can get to them before the critters do, and you can eat them fresh or dried. So he really wanted to encourage somebody to work on, you know, a breeding program to try to, you know, breed these and make them a little more, you know, oh, somebody's writing, who is Antonio Sanchez? He's the nursery manager at the Samo Fund Nursery, the Santa Monica Mountains Foundation Native Nursery. And I've been listening to a lot of his Zoom talks on growing milkweed and growing natives lately. He's got several more coming up this summer. So maybe I can post, look up his, but if you look up Samo Fund, SAMOFUND, I think it's samofund.org, and look under the calendar there. Anyway, this is my last slide. So just hopefully you might, you know, want to try some of these that you hadn't heard of before, or try some, even some of the ones you have heard, you know, plant more of them. Yes, and a lot of these are good for pollinators too. Hummingbirds love those pomegranate flowers.
So diversity, getting back to a little review. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and you can actually ask us live, or you can write the questions in the chat. But the pollinator garden that you see here, the different flowers. Now, I started out gardening out here in Riverside more as a foodie purist, meaning that anything and everything I would grow is only because I wanted to eat it. I love to eat. So if I'm to the left side of my property, I want to be able to eat something, even if it's chives, I'll eat it, or if it's berries, you know, wherever I'm kind of moseying along, I want to be able to eat something. Anyway, so pollinators are excellent. One, you're evolving your ecology, you're improving your soil, bringing in, we have so many different types of birds now, and insects and native flowers that I haven't even seen for 13 years start coming and developing and growing on our property, that it's always an investigation. What is this? But the different flowers I wanted to point out here, you see some yellow ones in the foreground, but there's different shapes of flowers. Sometimes they're daisies and they're open and the bees come along. Sometimes they're tubular, which Christine would say that, you know, are great for the hummingbirds. So different flowers and shapes. Bumblebees need a hardy flower that they can land on and their heavy bodies and, you know, be able to drag down and open. And there's only some flowers that can only be pollinated by a bumblebee because it does open the flower in a certain way. So this is, I want to encourage you to keep the journey, keep the investigation and the curiosity about growing the proper plants for your property and improving your ecology. Don't just spray all these insecticides, fungicides, herbicides all over your property, because eventually you commit, yes, ecocide. You kill it all off. And we want to improve our health and our mental health, right? So to have a variety of different colors, they're fun to look at, and all the different critters that fly through and the insects and the butterflies is just a diversity, and it's a win-win-win. And get your family and your kids out there and grow. You can do so much science and math and social studies out there, counting all these different critters in a 1 square foot, you know, space with your kids. Multiplication tables. You plant 1 apple seed, how many apples do you get on a tree? Anyway, but that's a longer term. Do we have any questions? Oh, you're on mute, Christine.
I have just one. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, well, I was just saying, if you're getting kids involved, give them a portion of the garden for themselves. Let them plant, you know, and don't tell them, oh, that's all wrong. Let them figure out a lot of that on their own. And also, I just noticed Larry made a comment that Pakistan mulberries don't stain the concrete. So cool. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, 2 things. Thank you so much to Christine and Lisa. You guys are just fountains of knowledge and information. This has really been fun. Just a clarifying question. Larry also happened to mention to me that there's called chocolate and coffee cake persimmons as varieties. And I'm just wondering.
We've got those in our orchard at the Hurupa Mountain Discovery Center. Larry grafted them onto it.
You just answered my question. I was wondering where we could potentially find such things.
Yeah, they're in our orchard, so maybe next year they'll be big enough we can take some cuttings off for scions.
That would really be wonderful. So thank you so much. This has really been a lot of fun.
And Dan, if you're not already a member of the California Rare Fruit Growers, I would encourage you to join. We're such a down-to-earth group of people. And
I love it, down to earth. That's so appropriate.
Literally, and all the fruit that we grow too, we get to share with us all, with everyone else. So
that sounds wonderful. Yeah, my wife and I will probably look into that.
I mean, it's like $29 for a national like $41 a year. It's just so worth it.
Marvelous.
And all the education that's provided for us.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of clubs throughout the West Coast and even in Puerto Rico and Hawaii. And especially with everyone Zooming, I mean, we can get in and join other groups as well and share the science.
If there's a link or a website or something, feel free to send that.
Yes.
That would be
glad
great.
you asked.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
There was a comment previously from Larry that I missed. Sorry for the dogs in the background. Blackberries and sour citrus do fine in less sun. I have some that get early morning sun and filtered sun throughout the rest of the day. I've taken that advice and I planted a kumquat on the north side of my house that just gets a little bit of afternoon sun and it's doing just fine.
Now, if you are interested in gray water systems, We did a presentation on that a few months ago, and it is on Kirk Swanner's YouTube channel. So feel free to go back and watch that. It is very educational and entertaining. And it's another way that you can upscale and repurpose your water, especially from your laundry and other sources, and use that to grow banana circles, your citrus. So a lot of good things can come from that. And in Riverside County, it is legal to use gray water. Catherine, did you have a question?
No, just a thank you for this presentation. I do have a question on the coffee plants. Have you heard anything?
No, I've not heard back. Catherine, we announced last month that the San Diego chapter of the California Rare Fruit Growers was working with the Cooperative Extension for some hybridized California style coffee plants. And they were looking for people to grow those out. And I've put a direct message to our liaison, and I have not heard back yet. So I'll text them again or email them again tonight and see if we can still grab those. Thank you for the follow-up.
Let me know.
There's a question here from Umberto.
Catherine, really quick, email me. Let me know what kind of factors you might have as far as the coffee goes. I think that was, I had asked the liaison for that. If you're in super strong sun or very heavy wind, what kind of soil that you have in, because they have different coffee plants for each of these different factors.
Oh, okay. All right, I emailed you, I think, last time, but I'll go ahead and do that again. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
There's a comment here from Umberto asking if the orchard is open at the moment, and Christine answered, Woodford Mountains Discovery Center is open. Last I heard, Friday to Sunday. Any day they're open, the orchard's open. So yeah, Umberto, if you want to, we'll put you in contact with Frank. He's our wonderful guru out there helping with the irrigation and everything orchard related out there. So I believe I got your contact information. We'll put you in contact with Frank, and he'd be the best person to talk with about orchard out there. There's a comment from Amy Clayton that Linda Mullins grows coffee in her avocado orchard.
Coffee is an understory plant. So her avocados are actually acting as a shade structure to grow her coffee. Yeah.
But avocados are also an understory plant until they get so big.
Yeah.
So I've heard mentioned that you have an orchard. Is that meaning this group of rare rare gem people have an orchard where they are able to grow some of these things?
Yes, at the Heruga Mountain Discovery Center, which is off the 60 where the big dinosaurs are at, off the Pyrite.
Sure.
They allow us to manage their orchards up there. So we have a stone fruit orchard, stone fruit meaning nectarines, peaches. We've got palms like apples. And
very nice. Very nice.
Asian pears, bananas.
I'm newly retired from teaching, and I used to teach at Patriot High School, so I know that area real well.
Yeah. So you're more than welcome to go in there when it's open, roam around. That is our home location. So when we're not Zooming in BC, before COVID, that's where we used to meet every first Thursday evening.
Okay.
7 till 9.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Yeah, Umberto, if you go tomorrow morning, let us know how it looks up there. And yeah, we got a couple orchards. There's a citrus orchard, and then there's the big orchard up top with stone fruits and all sorts of different stuff now. Really getting some diversity in there, and also an apple orchard on the lower side of the property. So quite a lot going on up there.
All right.
Christine, you're on mute. I see your mouth moving.
How do I keep doing that? I didn't touch the keyboard. Anyway, at our Facebook page, we have a satellite image of the Herb Mountains Discovery Center, and it shows the location of the orchard on there. But it's kind of up behind the main gift shop museum building.
Excellent.
It's a fun place to bring your family right now. I mean, there's different olive groves. There's a cactus walking tour. They have guided tours for a nominal fee as well. Everyone's very nice. There's huge tortoises on site. You can see road runners. Lots of lizards, of course. So the kids just love it. The Iris Society, the Riverside County Iris Society also meets there. They've got some gorgeous iris raised bed gardens over there as well.
So very enticing.
Yes, come out and join us.
Yeah.
If you're interested in becoming a member, go ahead and leave a message in the chat box, and we can email you out a membership form.
Humberto, how's this black sapote? Are you you said it's fruiting. Have you had one before? What are your thoughts there? And also, for those that missed the beginning of the meeting, next month we will be having, I'm not sure his last name, but Rod from Wong Farms come on and talk about mangoes. So I believe, Humberto, if you're also in the California Mango Grower Facebook group, we'll be sure to advertise over there as well. So Dan, we will send you the membership form. No worries.
Make it so. Yes.
Diversity in garden clubs is also essential. It helps develop our ecology. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. It's been a pleasure, and support your local gardener. If you can't grow your own garden, or not yet, or if it's in the planning stage, this is when you need to network with your neighbors that are growing and tap their brains and tap their minds and see what's going on.
Or as Nick says, think of our orchard as your backyard, an extension of your backyard. So come play in our orchard. You know, it's there for us as a learning experience. We do, pruning workshops out there. So maybe they're not all pruned perfectly because we've had novices working on them, but you can see how things grow so you know what you might want to plant at home.
Maybe with the helpline sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see
Thank you.
next on the first Thursday of next month, again at 7 o'clock, and bring your questions. Feel free to contact any of us either through our Facebook page, facebook.com/IECRFG for Inland Empire California Rare Fruit Growers. That's why we shortened it, because it's such a mouthful. Anyway, have a wonderful summer. Otherwise, stay cool and make sure that you have those scorching summer garden tactics under your belt, and you start practicing that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Christine.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.